You're very welcome to the copywriting section of this course. In the last section, we looked at email marketing and you set up your email forms on your website. By the end of this section, you will know how to write copywriting that sells using the AIDA formula. And it's really appropriate that we look at this topic at the halfway point in the course because you're going to be using copywriting throughout many of the sections that are coming up. Also, before you start to drive traffic to your website from these search engines, YouTube, Facebook, etc., you really want to make sure that you understand how to take those readers, suspicious readers, and turn them into trusting, eager to buy customers in the blink of an eye. That is really what sales copy can do. And if you don't know how to write sales copy, then you can be really wasting a lot of your effort driving traffic over only to see them not convert. That's why it's important to really use this AIDA formula. And in this first lecture, what I want to do is just give you a brief overview of what is coming up. We're going to start with really understanding what copywriting is and why it's so important. I'm really going to show you in quite a lot of detail then how you're going to be using copywriting in each of these sections in the course. Next, after that, we'll be reminding you about really writing for your buyer persona, and you'll be dusting off your buyer personas from your marketing plan to really see how it fits in and connects with copywriting. Also, we'll refer back to our goals and also how that links into copywriting, because you want to be using copywriting to persuade people to complete those actions that you've set up in Google Analytics and really that link back to your business goals. Next, after we lay that foundation, we really get into AIDA. This is the most powerful way to structure your sales copy to really get results. And it breaks down into 4 parts: attention, interest, desire, and action. And it all starts with attention and getting those headlines. And you learn that really those headlines are where 80% of your efforts should go, because that delivers 80% of the results. Really, this graph will show you here that all of the attention is at the top, and that's where you should really be focusing your attention. And I'm going to give you 11 tips for writing magnetic headlines. I'm going to get into a lot of detail, tools even to help you write headlines, and lots of great resources where you can really model the best in the business. So after those 11 tips to write the headlines, we move on to interest. Once you've got their attention, you need to turn that into interest by really connecting with their problem. After you've identified the problem for them, you've got to create that desire for your solution and make them really feel the transformation. Then finally, we're looking at action and ways to really lead that reader towards action by using call to actions. And there's really 5 great tips to get that done as well. So that is what is coming up in this section of the course. Copywriting is really important. It touches every part of marketing, and this is going to be a skill and a formula that you can really carry with you no matter what you're doing. Now that you know what's coming up, let us get stuck into the first lecture, where you'll learn what copywriting actually is and why it's so important for your business. I'll see you in the next lecture. In the last lecture, you got an overview of the AIDA formula and what you're going to achieve in this section of the course. In this lecture now, you're going to learn what copywriting is and really why it's so important for your business. Let's start off with what is copywriting? How do we answer this question? Well, really, copywriting is using written words to persuade people to take the action that you want them to. For example, make a purchase, submit an email, request a demo. But how do you actually do that? It really comes down to presenting an argument strong enough to convince the visitor that what you're going to provide them, like a product, an email newsletter, a free quote, is worth more than what they are really giving you, whether that be $9.99, their email address, or a phone number. So that is the process. Essentially, it's sales in the written form, and it's really just persuading people to take an action in return for you giving them something. So why is copywriting so important? Well, the main benefit of copywriting is that it really helps increase sales. Consider this. If you want to increase your sales, you have two real options. One is to double your traffic. So if you want to double your sales, you can double your price, but you'll probably get no one buying. You can double your traffic, but traffic is not always easy to generate. It doesn't come on demand, and it can also be a costly choice if you're paying for that traffic. Now, what you can do instead is double your conversion rate with better copy. By writing better words, more persuasive words, you can convince more people to take that action and to really buy your product. Now, that's a lot easier to do, to adjust a couple of words, than to actually double your traffic. And even if you can move your conversion rate, which is the percentage of people that completes that action, from 1% to 2%, you're really going to see an impact from copywriting. And that's really how powerful good sales copy can be. It can be the same as doubling your traffic if you can just change a few words, present benefits in a different way that really meet what the buyer is looking for. Then it's so powerful. It's amazing to see that even changing just a couple of words can just have such a big impact. As well as it being a powerful way to really increase sales, you're going to be using copywriting almost across all of the marketing activities that you do. And that's really why it's so important as well. Especially the activities that you'll be taking in this course, you'll need copywriting for almost all of them. Or really, I guess, all of these activities will benefit from copywriting and they'll help you generate more traffic and sales. So that's why it's important to learn copywriting up front before you start to really get into these marketing channels, because the principles and the best practices that you learn here will really be applied across all of these. And we already saw one of them when we looked at our market research and really explaining the benefits of people completing your survey. To remind you of that, let me come into the market research notes here. And way down the end here, I referred to this really copywriting aspect of really getting people to take action. And here we've got it. When I was talking about distributing your Typeform survey, I suggested that you make sure your email subject line or wherever you post your email really says something that will catch people's attention. What you often see with people sending out surveys is, can you help me? Can you take a few minutes? But that's not interesting. And where's really the benefit from me? If you turn that around and show the benefit for people, like, I'm making a new course for you and I'd love your input, there's clearly a benefit for the person there. And you can see that that is just a change in perspective, a change of a few words. But I believe that for me, that resulted in a much better uptake in that survey and completion rate. So that is really the power. It's the power of the approach, and it's really how you're persuading and communicating with people in the written word. Now, as well as seeing it in the market research section of the course, we also saw it in the email marketing section of the course. And I really showed you as well that it all can really come down to the subject line. If people don't open that subject line, they're not going to read your content, they're not going to take that action, and they're not going to move into maybe the next step towards becoming a customer or taking you up on your offer. So it can be disappointing to see that you've put in so much work to an email and a campaign or a competition and people don't open your emails. And I think for me, this is really where you'll see the impact of copywriting and how important headlines are. Because if people don't open the email, you've lost them. Whereas when you publish content online, it's not as definitive as that. It's not as clear cut. But I think the reality is, if they don't like the subject line, they're not going to read any further. They're not going to engage with you. So that's a real clear reason where headlines and copywriting is important. Now, SEO is another big place where copywriting comes into play. Writing those headlines, writing those content. You really want to get people to read your content and share your content. And also there's a crossover with SEO here. And not only writing headlines that people want to open, but also that they're SEO optimized for keywords, and I'm going to show you how to do that in the SEO section of the course. So there's a crossover there really with SEO as well. Now, the fourth activity and the fourth section of this course where there's a really crossover with copywriting is in YouTube. You're going to be writing your video headlines and have them SEO optimized. And you'll also be writing scripts for your videos as well. And to make those first 30 seconds especially, you're going to see is really, really important. Now, one of the most interesting metrics that we're going to look at in the YouTube section of the course is audience retention. And you can see a graph of it here and how quickly that audience retention falls off. You can see after 25 seconds, the number of people who are watching has dropped to 50%. A lot of people still finish out to the end, but you can't see this type of data for written text, but you can be guaranteed that it's pretty similar. In the first 30 seconds, people are really deciding after they've read that headline if they're going to continue watching what you've got. And it's the same in really the written word as well. They might like the headline, they'll click in, but if they don't like the first paragraph, they're out of there. And that's the same with YouTube as well. So seeing these metrics, I think for video, you can really leverage them back across to the written word and understand that that first paragraph is really important as well. And that's why when you're writing your scripts, copywriting really comes into play. Facebook and Twitter, of course, you need to create posts that people will engage with. And that first line is really what people see. Those headlines is what goes viral, not really the blog post. It's the headlines that communicate clearly. Quora is a marketing channel where there's a big crossover with copywriting because really all of the content there is the written word. It's not so heavy on images and videos like Facebook is. And so really this is a place where you can really see a lot of different people writing and their different writing skills. And in the Quora section of the course, I show you the process and the structure that I really recommend. This is the process and the structure that has got me on my top answers, almost 7,000 views. And you can see that I do use an image, but it's really broken up into different steps with bullet points, links out. It's clear, it's easy to read. And so I personally think that Quora is a great place to practice your copywriting and also to find great writers, the styles that you like, so you can really model from them. Now, the final place where there's a big crossover between copywriting and the other sections of this course and in general is with Google AdWords. You're going to be learning how to write effective ads, and I'll be showing you 6 tips to really make that happen. So here in the notes for the Google AdWords section of the course, you can see right down here, I think it is step number 7. I show you how to write effective ads and really follow these 6 tips. And that's matching your ad to your landing page, highlighting what's unique, including prices, promotions, exclusives, empower customers to take action, include your keywords, and follow Google's editorial guidelines. So you can see even for writing ads, it's important because that is really how you persuade people to click through. So as you can see, copywriting really covers and feeds into every single section of this course. And that's really how important copywriting is. It's not a standalone topic. You use it on your website and you use it within all of these marketing channels as well to really persuade people to take action. So it is a key digital marketing skill, and it's really going to be worth investing your time and getting good at this because the impact that it has can be as big as doubling your traffic, and that can be much more hard work to get done. So that really wraps up on what is copywriting and why is copywriting important. Now in the next lecture, we're going to recap on really how to write for your buyer persona to link back in this concept about the buyer persona so that you're really approaching copywriting in the right way. This is the first mistake that a lot of people make, is not having a clear buyer persona when they're writing. So I'll see you in the next lecture where you'll learn how to write for your buyer persona. In the last lecture, you learned what copywriting is and why copywriting is so important. I showed you a couple of examples about how we've already seen it in some of these sections of the course, and really some examples of how you'll be using it later on in the course as well. So it's not a standalone topic, it's really integrated into everything else because you'll be using words to persuade people both on your website and off your website to really take action. Now in this lecture, you're going to learn how to write for your buyer persona. I just really want to resurface this point about buyer persona because it's really relevant to copywriting. And the key point here is that you cannot write effective sales copy or copy in general unless you know who you're writing for, how that person thinks, and what their needs are. So it's time to really dust off the buyer persona that you made in the marketing plan section of the course. You'll remember that we spent quite a bit of time on this. It was step 1 in the 5-step process to create your marketing plan. And here's the example of mine once again to remind you. It's a semi-fictional person, but including a lot of information about them so you can really picture them in your mind and really understand what their pain points are, what's holding them back, and what they need help with. If you have that in mind when you are writing your copy, it's going to be much more effective because you're not going to be writing for a large crowd. You're really going to be writing for that one buyer persona, and you'll know how to serve those best. So I've included the links there back to the marketing plan template, and also how you can gather some feedback from your buyer personas about their pain points, and sending out that survey with Typeform, which was really priceless to hear in people's own words what they're struggling with. So you can even in your copy that you put on your page use those same words, those pain points that people have identified and the key things that they're really looking for. So if you haven't done research, then don't expect to get great results. But as you've done it already in this course, I think you are really approaching copywriting already with the right mindset. And this is a big mistake that a lot of people make. They don't have a buyer persona in mind when they start to write sales copy and try and drive traffic to their site, and it's just a situation that can lead to a lot of waste. So that is really resurfacing the buyer persona. You're going to be using them for copywriting, but before you write a single word, there's another common mistake people make, and that is not clearly defining goals. If you want results, you need to start setting goals. And when your goals are set, you can find out really best how to achieve them. So set your goal before you write a single word. Each page should have one goal. And what action are you trying to persuade your readers to take? Is there anything on the page that is distracting them from that goal? And as a general rule for copywriting, what I would say is that you should just have one clear goal for the person and get them to complete that action. If you have a lot of competing pop-ups and different offers and incentives, people can get distracted because you're presenting so many options to them, and sometimes what they do is just, instead of making a decision, they just leave the page. So be willing to put creative, innovative copy ideas aside if boring to the point copy is what actually works, and keep that goal in mind. We've set up a goal in the email marketing section of the course as well, really in Google Analytics, to get people to sign up to your email list. That was the goal that I suggested there. We're tracking that in Google Analytics as well. We set up a goal. So really the copywriting at this stage should really be aimed at persuading people to sign up to your email list. And we are not just thinking that that's our goal and writing it down on paper. We're actually tracking that as well for our website. What you should really remember is that every headline, image, subject line should tie back to your buyer persona and really persuade them to take that action that you defined for them on the page. And I think one key exercise that I've personally found helpful and that I think you should use as well, is as you were going through the writing process, bring that buyer persona into the room. Imagine they're sitting there beside you, looking over your shoulder at their computer, and imagine how they'd react to your content. Would they jump out of their seat if they saw your headline? Would they really be interested to learn more? Or, would they not be? It's just a simple exercise. It can get you looking at your own work from a different perspective, and really make sure you're aligned to your buyer persona. So that is just a quick recap and exercise that you can use, but it's really important to do on an ongoing basis, so you make sure that you're really writing for your buyer persona and meeting their needs. All right, coming up in the next lecture then, we're really getting stuck into AIDA, and we're going to focus on the A for AIDA, which is attention, and really how you get that attention with magnetic headlines. In the last lecture, I reminded you about your buyer persona and really to think about your buyer persona when you are writing your copy. Bring them into the room and really see if your content, imagine, is what you're writing really going to persuade them to take that one goal that you've set for that page, and that goal should really link back to the goal that you set in Google Analytics and your business goals in general. In this lecture now, we're really getting into the first part of the AIDA process. The AIDA really formula is the way that you are going to structure your sales copy. And the first part of that formula and the first part of successful sales copy is really getting attention. You need to get the reader's attention, and the way that you do that is by writing magnetic headlines. Now, before we get into some of the formulas to write headlines, I think it's really important that you understand how important headlines actually are. And this is going to be the key takeaway from this lecture, is that headlines are really 80 cents on the dollar. And I'm going to explain that really in a second. But if you want your blog post, email, course to have an impact on your readers, the first thing that you must do is get their attention and cause them to want to read further. So before you can really deliver that value to people, the first thing that you need to do is get their attention. That's where the whole process starts. Without their attention, you cannot cause them to be interested. You cannot get them to desire your product or service, and you can't get them to really take action. So it all starts with attention. It's really the most important part of this whole process, and it's the most important part of copywriting as well. Your reader will only be interested in really knowing what's in it for me. Why should I invest my time in reading on? And this is an important point, especially the time that we live in. People really, really value their time. They're ordering taxis on apps just to save themselves a couple of minutes. So you can be sure that they are really deciding quite critically whether they're going to read your content, because they really want to know what's in it for them and is it going to be worth it. Now, why are headlines so important, and why are they so important for getting attention? And this is the key quote that really comes from David Ogilvy. There's a picture of him here, maybe to give you a visual of it. But really what he said is, on average, 5 times as many people read the headline as read the body copy. When you have written your headline, you've spent 80 cents of your dollar. Now, really what he is meaning there is the headline is what people really read. And he was kind of like an ad guy. I used to buy ad space. So the headline for him actually had a monetary cost. But I think this is a good way for you to think about it as well, that if when you've written your headline, really that is what people are going to see. So that is where you've spent 80 cents of your dollar. It's really where all of your effort should go, because that is what is going to get the most amount of attention. Now, to make another visual of that same quote and concept, I've just put together this diagram here, really showing that only 5% of the people who really see your article or see your Twitter, Facebook post, or Udemy course are actually going to read down into everything. The first thing that they're going to see is the image, and 100% of people will see that. The next thing is the headline. 80% of people will see the headline, but all the way down those numbers start to drop. The last paragraph gets a bit of attention, usually in journalism, like a wrap up, a summary of what it is, but the actual content in the middle gets very little attention. But this is kind of the reverse of often where we spend a lot of our time. We really make things harder for ourselves to get those results because we spend little time on the headline and we spend most of our time writing this body copy, the middle of the page, which gets the least amount of attention. So if you were to do an 80-20 analysis, where should you really be spending 80% of your time? It's on that top 20%, which is really the image and the headline. And that's what I'm suggesting to you. Instead of pouring energy and resources into those small gains, like spending a lot of time on your body copy, focus your attention on the simple changes that make a huge difference. It's really about working smarter and not harder. So now that you understand the importance of headlines and really how they are 80 cents of the dollar in terms of where you should be investing your effort, that's really what you should be thinking about. Now, my recommendation is that when you're writing a landing page, a blog post, or an email, you should really start with the headline or start with this subject line. We really usually start with a post idea, we write it up, and then we try to come up with a viral headline that will blow people away. But it's kind of backwards if you think about it. Blog posts don't go viral. It's really headlines that do. It's the headlines that people share on Facebook. It's the headlines people talk at the water cooler, because complex ideas do not go viral. Viral ideas are simple yet impactful. Headlines also set the expectation for the rest of the article. So if you put the blog post first and then only realize later that can't actually be summed up into a viral headline, you'll either write not a great headline or you'll write a misleading one. So that is really the importance of headlines and really how you should approach your copywriting in general. Start with the headline because it gets the most attention, and it also will be the place where people decide if they're moving on to the next step, if they're going to click through, if they're going to continue reading to the first paragraph. So that is really the takeaway to keep in mind. It's 80 cents of the dollar. This is where you should invest your time. And that's why in the next lecture, I'm really going to give you 11 post formulas to write killer headlines. In the last lecture, you got introduced to AIDA, the powerful way that you are going to structure your sales copy, your Facebook posts, your emails, your blog posts, your landing pages. It's really the same formula that you can use over and over again. And really attention is the first part of that. And where you get attention is in the headline. We learned that really headlines are 80 cents of the dollar. And this is really where you should focus your attention. And this is really where you should start the process, because it sets the expectation for the rest of the article. Now in this lecture, what you were going to learn are 11 tips for writing magnetic headlines. You understand how important they are, so let us look at how you can actually write great headlines. And the first tip of the 11 tips is really to practice. Way back at the start of the post here, I noted down that copywriters aren't born, they practice. And that is really key. If you want to write great headlines, you need to practice. If you want more clicks, more conversions, more sales, then practicing the headlines is really important. And to help you practice writing headlines for every piece of content that you're putting out, I've included this great tool that I came across, Write 25 Headlines. I've used this for myself, and it is a really fantastic way to practice writing headlines. What you do is just come across to the headlines tab here, and then you just type in the first idea that you have for your blog post, the name of your course, whatever it is, and write it in here. Then you can write it in again, refine it, add more benefit, show how you can help them overcome an obstacle, and so on, down to number 3, the 4th iteration, 5th iteration, 6th iteration. Now there are a lot, 25 is quite a lot, but I think even if for every piece of content that you are doing at least 5 attempts at improving your headline, that will really help you. You've seen how important they are, so it's definitely worth putting in a little bit of time to refine it, to make it better, rather than going with just the first idea that comes into your head. So that is a fantastic tool. The second tip to really write magnetic headlines is to model the best in the business. Now, I've included a link to this website here, Jeff Bullis. He is a real master at writing headlines. I've come across his website and his work, and he's just really the best that I've ever seen. So I'm including his link here so you can come into his site and really get a lot of inspiration. You can see he's over 16 million readers. He's been featured in all these magazines. And I think the reason that he's been able to achieve that is his ability to write amazing headlines. Coming into the site, you'll see all of his articles here. And the first one is fantastic. The undeniable power of search engine marketing. The next one here, 11 advanced tips to be a successful digital marketer. 5 easy steps for creating a traffic driving expert roundup. 3 secret Gmail buttons. You can see that these are all viral headlines, and this is how he's been able to really get all of these type of shares, because it all comes down to the headline. This is what really makes the difference. This is what gets people to share and open things. And what you can do is come into his site here, and really you could just take the formulas that he's written out here that have been proven and use them for yourself. So 11 advanced tips to be insert your topic or the role or the person that you are really targeting. The undeniable power of just slot in your topic in there. I mean, 5 easy steps for creating whatever it is, the outcome that your buyer persona wants. I really like this guy, and I'd recommend you come in and check out the work that he does, because you can just really take those formulas that he's written and use them for yourself. Now, getting into some of those formulas, let me give you some tips as well. Tip number 3 is to really start with numbers. We saw the example there, 5 easy steps, top 15 websites, 21 actionable strategies, 7 ways to make yourself a happier person every day, 7 secrets, 7 proven, 7 reasons, 7 tips, etc. And really these numbers work really well, just like this, 11 tips, because people can see that there's a structure in place, and they can also see that there are really bite-sized content here, that things are going to be broken up into a list that's easy to read, easy to scan, and it's not going to be a big block of text or something that's going to be difficult for them to read and get through. So starting with numbers is extremely a powerful way to write a magnetic headline. Another thing that just works and still works to this day is the how-to headline. So here's an example that went very viral: how to make lavender lemonade to get rid of headaches and anxiety. So it's a how-to plus how to make whatever it is, and then really to get rid of. You can really take those words out and slot your words in. Here's a couple of other templates that you can use: how to do blank, even if, and then include that common obstacle. Here's another template that you can use, really how to do blank without common objection. And so those are some formulas that you can really use for the how-to headlines as well. Tip number 5 for writing magnetic headlines is to use punctuation. So this is a very simple technique, but really want to place your main keyword before the colon or hyphen and add your benefit headline after it. So for example, the first section of this course is called Marketing Plan Template, Create Your First Marketing Plan in 5 Steps. And this is also great for SEO. I talk about it in the SEO section of the course, really the importance of putting your keyword at the start of the title of your page, so the search engines can really identify what your page is about. It also just helps communicate really what the topic is about, and it's great for SEO as well. So tips number 6 to writing magnetic headlines is to be ultra specific. Remember that the headlines really set the expectation for the rest of the article, so you want to define what the article is really going to be about. A bad headline would be, write a song. A better headline would be how to compose your own song, songwriting 101. So people can really see that this is for beginners, and this is going to be my own song as well. Tip number 7 to writing magnetic headlines is to flag common mistakes. So this is essentially like a list post or a numbered post, but instead of focusing on maybe the 5 ways, the 5 proven, you're talking about the 16 common copywriting mistakes that you're making and how to fix them. This is a real title here that is really great, because for mistakes, you really want to avoid those mistakes. So you want to click on that title because you want to make sure you're not making the mistakes. And if you are, well, then they're showing you the solutions. Here's another one. Are you making these 10 common Google AdWords mistakes? So it's talking about mistakes, and it's kind of a question. And that is the actual next tip, is to really ask questions. So do you want to build a snowman? Read this guide first. Do you think you know SEO? Quiz yourself and find out. And questions especially are great on social media to engage people and really ask them to engage in comments as well. It's a strategy we look at in the Facebook marketing section of the course, as well as the Twitter section of the course. Now, tip number 9 to writing magnetic headlines is to use the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, why. These are really great words to articulate to your readers what the kind of information is about that you really intend to provide. Tip number 10 to writing magnetic headlines is to pay attention to the headline length. It's different depending on where you're writing it. And in fact, in this tool that I showed you, the 25 headlines, what's great about this is that he's actually broken down this tool into 3 different tabs. So first you've got the headlines. These are really for the search engines. You want to keep the length here, as is suggested, between maybe 50 and 60 characters, around 55 characters. Otherwise, the headline will get cut off in the search results if it's longer than that. If for writing tweets, you probably want to keep it around 100 characters, 120 characters. You do have 140 characters, but you want to be able to leave some space there for people to maybe add in a little note in front of your tweet if they're retweeting it, etc. And then finally, emails. This is probably the shortest headline that you have, and so you want to keep it between 35 and 40 characters. And going over that is really going to look like spam. So it's important to know that the length of your headlines is going to be really different depending on where you're writing. And what I suggest is you really start to write your headline in whichever platform you're using. So if you're writing a blog post, start to write the headline right within WordPress or your website builder, so you can really get a great sense of right from the start what the length is that you have to work with. I've done it before, and it's a common mistake, I think, to start writing a headline. You perfected it, then you bring it into maybe WordPress and you find out, oh, it's too long. And then you really have to rework the whole thing to try and make it work. Now, the final tip is to use an image to enhance your headline. As we saw earlier in this diagram up here, is that 100% of people will really see the image. People can pick up images hundreds of times faster than they will read text. So you should really use it for your posts, your Facebook posts across social media, because it really gets attention and it really communicates the headline in your picture. Now, one of the best in the business, as I said here, not only for the headlines, but in putting in the images as well that enhance and support the headlines, is this guy here. You can see the undeniable power, something very visual there. 3 Gmail secrets, they've got a kind of a secret there. 5 easy steps, the future of search engine marketing, 11 ways to use Facebook. So they're quite eye-catching images. Some of them are extremely related to the title, and really support and communicate what the headline is about and what the article is about. So those are the 11 tips to writing magnetic headlines. I'd encourage you to use some of these formulas, also to look for inspiration, and finally then to practice. Remember that if you want to write great headlines, you need to practice. And I think this Write 25 Headlines tool is a great way to do that. So that really wraps up attention. We've learned how important it is and also then how to actually implement it for yourself. In the next lecture, we're really getting into interest. It's the second part of our AIDA formula. So I'll see you there. In the last lecture, you learned 11 tips for writing magnetic headlines. I gave you the tools to really practice those headlines and also places that you can look for inspiration, and also then the formulas that you can use and the tips to really write magnetic headlines. Now that was really the most important part of our AIDA formula, the formula that we're using to structure powerful sales copy. And that really finished off with attention. Now in this lecture, we're going to cover interest, desire, and action. And this is really the remaining parts of the formula. We spent a lot of time on attention because it is the most important part of copywriting. If you can't get their attention and get them into the top of this funnel, then you will not have success with the other parts. So we spent 80% of our time talking about AIDA or talking about attention, because that is the most important part to work on. But now that you're confident with that, the next step is really to move on to interest. And I think a great way to think about these next two steps are to look at them like this. I think what I was confused about before was, what's the difference between interest and desire? Where does interest start and desire stop? I think an easy way to think about this is, first, you've got to really connect with the problem. If you want to get their interest, the first thing that you have to do is really connect with their problem. Show that you understand their problem so that they know that what you're even talking about is relevant to them. So that's how you really get their interest. And then in order to get their desire, you've got to make them really feel the transformation that your solution is going to offer. So another way that people structure presentations is problem solution. And I think that really fits in nicely here. You show the problem to get their interest, and then you can really get their desire by making them feel the transformation that your solution gives it. So that's the way I think about it. That's my little spin on it. And I hope that helps you understand it a bit better. So how do you really understand their problem, or how do you show that you understand their problem? Well, one thing you can do, and it's very easy, is to share your personal experience. You may have some personal experience with the problems that you encountered, that they're encountering, and that's a very easy way to really create more rapport with your readers. Another thing that you can do is share customer stories. Like you could be selling a piece of software, and you could say, Mary, who's a manager, was having XYZ problem, and they can really identify, yes, I'm similar to her and I have those problems as well. Another thing that you can do is really share fictional stories. So you can make it entertaining and use humor. And one good example that I came across before that did that is this article here. The headline: how to develop your buyer persona and reel in better customers. And he gets straight into it with a very interesting question, and then a kind of a story, a fictional story, to really keep your interest. So he talks about, if you wanted to catch a fish, how would you do it? And then he really talks about the problem. Well, you could throw a line in the ocean and hope for the best. And that is really the problem that people have in terms of developing the buyer persona, not having a strategy or a way to do it. And so he sets up the problem, helps you identify with it and understand it, and then he goes on to give the solution later on. Now, another way that you can really show that you understand their problem is to share other people's stories. Here's a great example of that. This is a blog post by James Clear, and it's not so much a sales letter, but I think he uses the technique here. and it's a good example. So here's the headline: this coach improved every tiny thing by 1%, and here's what happened. So in 2010, David faced a tough job. So straight away he's talking about, and this is really relevant for anybody who's faced a tough job. So that's the problem that he's really identified. He's connected with the problem because he's showing a story about Dave, who also faced a tough job. So you know that if you've had a tough job, or you're experiencing a tough job, or you're going to be having a tough job, this could be something that's going to be relevant. And here's really the tough job: that no British cyclist had ever won the Tour de France. So nobody had ever done this before. How was he going to find a solution? That's something that the readers of this blog might be facing themselves. And then he really gets into the approach and how he actually went about resolving that tough job and doing something that nobody had ever done before. So I think those are some interesting examples about showing that you understand the problem. Another one that you might be more familiar with is, say, those infomercials on TV. They start off, they're black and white, the person looks depressed, they highlight some of the problems very quickly, and it becomes easy to identify with those problems. And then they set it really up for the next step, which is to create some desire and make the person really feel the transformation. So that's what you want to do after you have really connected with their problem. And what you want to do is really build interest for your solution and show how it can really solve their problem. The end goal is to really cause a shift in their mind and get them to start imagining themselves in your solution. And I think one common mistake when you're trying to really make them feel the transformation is to sell the product features rather than the benefits for the customer. So if you really want to make people feel that transformation and what the solution feels like, talking about the product features is not really going to help them do that. For example, there's a famous drill example. People don't buy a drill to have a drill. They buy a drill because they need a 3/4 inch hole in the wall. That's really the benefit for them. And even going further on that, they buy a drill because they want to fix things around the house. They want to feel like they have those skills. And for a man, it might be they want the wife to compliment them and to feel like a handyman. So those are some of the benefits, and the point there is really to focus less on all of the great things about your product and more about how the product will make the visitor's life better and how it will make the visitor really feel. And I think that goes back to some of the very basics of marketing. It's really all about them and what you can do for them. It's not so much about your product and how great it is. It's all really about them and the solution and the transformation that it can make for them. So that really, now once you've presented the problem and you have showed them the solution to their problem, the next step is really action. This is the final step in the AIDA process. And what you want to do is really lead your readers to action. The CTA, the call to action, is the final instruction for your reader. You've worked hard by now. You've got their attention, you've hooked their interest, you've created desire. So isn't it appropriate really to ask for action now? And here's really 5 tips to create an irresistible call to action. The first thing is really to have a call to action, and not only have it, but have it on every single page. Everything that you should write should have a call to action. After all, you're creating that content for a specific reason. So what else I would suggest is to start with a command verb like buy, shop, order, download, subscribe, watch, share, fill in the form, find out how, and really direct people with a command to what the next step should be. You can also create some urgency and use some discrete measurements of time in your call to action. Phrases like click now, try our software today, offer expires on this date, and to show them really how easy and immediate some of those actions will be. One other tip is to really use contrasting colors to draw attention to that call to action, and that can be simply something like a bolded piece of text, or you could actually add in additional colors to really make it stand out. The final tip is to really use a no obligation statement that removes or reduces risk. So I'll give you an example of this plus the other tips here, and it's really from Udemy itself. They use a call to action called take this course rather than buy now. So here's an example of that. It's actually a free course. So this is start learning now. So they're starting with that command verb. They're using that urgency now. It's in a green button. It really pops off the page. The call to actions in a very visible location as well on this sales page. So there's an example of really the call to action, and really the script is in the video here and also down below. So for a sales page like this, the setup is very similar. There's the headline, the interest and the desire will be created in the video, and then the call to action will be at the end. To recap then, in this lecture you learned that after you get the reader's attention, the next step is to get their interest. And the way that you can get their interest is really by connecting with their problem, showing that you understand their problem, and the way that you can highlight that is really by telling stories of personal experience, customer stories, fictional stories, or other people's stories. After you have their interest and have identified the problem that they have, the next step is to start to show them the solution and really get them to want and desire the solution that you have. The way that you do that is really make them feel that transformation and really seeing the benefits of your product rather than just the features. After you have presented the solution and showed them how it's going to make them feel, the next step is to really lead them towards action. And you can lead them towards that action with these call to actions. You should have a call to action for every page. Start them with a command verb and make it stand out. Use colors to really make it pop off the page. You can also use these no obligation statements like take this course, start learning now, to really reduce the risk of people getting started. So that really wraps up on the interest, attention, and action. And in the next lecture now, let's pull everything together and really recap on how you can implement this for yourself.